I'm Steve Denning. I'm a professional musician and music instructor. This is my studio, and these are my students. I'm going to prove to my colleagues and to all of America that I can take 6 middle-aged women who have never played music before, teach them instruments, turn them into a band, and take them to the top of the charts.
I had a songwriting partner, and since I can't read music, he'd show me a music sheet and it was Greek to me, and so I sort of got close to it, you know, and he couldn't sing, right, and I couldn't read, like the blind leading the blind, so don't feel bad. And you know, you sit down and you say, well, what are you going to write about? You have to have an idea, you know, a little seed. And I like the fact that you're stressing about doing original material and having everyone contribute. That's a good experience.
It is. Because, you know, that's how writing is. It's organic, right? I mean, it starts with the players who are going to be playing it.
And I said, you want to start with a title or an idea? And he says, well, you know, he says, I was reading something the other day, and there's an old saying about how you can't get blood from a stone. And it's an unusual subject, and I don't know if we can do anything with it or not. And so we talked about it for a minute, and by the time I finished my coffee, I picked up the guitar and I'm just strumming. I don't know where I'm going yet. And out it comes, and it was, baby, baby, I should have known you can't get blood from a stone, and I can't get a love that's true from you. So we presented it very presumptuously to Imperial Records, and Jimmy Haskell, that I was talking about, got a hold of it, and he really liked it. And because of his influence, and it wasn't his position to necessarily choose the material, but he said that would be good for Rick Nelson. And Rick recorded it, and I was off in the Army when I got a letter from Rupert saying, our record just came out the other day. And I was thrilled to know that it was even out, and let alone by Rick, you know, because he was so popular.
Ricky Nelson, oh my gosh, one of my little heartthrobs. I loved all his music.
A week later, I get another letter, and this time it was from Imperial Records. I thought, uh-oh, they're gonna scold me about something, you know, that's the first thing a person thinks about. And I opened it up, and it was a check. There was nothing else in there, just a check. I thought, wow, that's great. Now, in the Army, in those days, as a private, I was making $78 a month, right?
Wow.
78, that's it. And I look at this check, and it said $250. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven, and it had only been out for a week, you know. And then I looked again. I'm counting the zeros. It was $2,500 for that week. That year, they came up with a whole new type of recording. Originally, they had 78s, which was about 10 inches across and very heavy wax. And then they came out with the 45s, which we have all seen, I'm sure, and they're 7 inches. And usually there was a song on each side, right? Well, they came out that year with what they called an EP, an extended play. And so he got on this new category on Cashbox and Billboard, and it was in the top 10 immediately.
Wow.
Right? It stayed there in the top 10 for 26 weeks. That's a half a year. And so needless to say, I was buying lunch for my buddies in the Army a lot more than the other way around.
Sometimes he would mention some artists, and I was like, who is that? Not that I want to be lame or anything. I'm not lame. I just, you know, we don't always listen to that part of life, you know. I
formed a group called the Storytellers, a folk group. And the Storytellers preceded the Kingston Trio and Joan Baez even, and Dylan and all those people. And so I feel that we were quite an influence on other people that got into the music business performing as what they call folk singers. And but I wrote most of the songs, and even though they sounded folky, they weren't old folk songs.
Right.
And as I kept innovating, they had sort of an undertone of rock and roll. And so we were on the front of the thing again in terms of we preceded Sonny and Cher and looked like Sonny and Cher before they did. And you know, you remember how Kantari was so tall, and she used to wear those leopard pedal pushers or whatever.
Kantari is his
Yeah.
ex-wife.
And so when we first started, it was just the two of us called the Storytellers. And the first time we did a show, we were introduced to the world as the Storytellers by the man in black himself, Johnny Cash. And I might add, when afterwards we were all talking backstage, and all the time he was talking to me, he was looking at Kantari, you know. And, but anyway.
That would be weird if he was looking at you.
What's that?
That'd be weird
Yeah,
if
that
he
would
was
be.
staring
Well,
at you.
yeah, I guess.
They're
But
standing there, right?
I remember listening to the Storytellers.
really?
Yes, I
Okay,
do.
that's good.
I never.
That's cool,
Yeah.
When I first started writing, what you do, you present your songs to a publisher or a record company so that it gets through them to an artist that wants to record it. That's the procedure. And there was a record company, a small record company called Specialty Records, but they had two artists that were especially getting quite recognized. One was Sam Cooke, who became a very good friend of mine. I love Sam. And the other one was Little Richard, Mr. Rock and Roll himself. Gosh, what a crazy guy. So anyway, when that happened, we had to go through what they call an A&R man, artist and repertoire. And the A&R man is responsible for screening all the songs, and believe me, there's a lot, that are presented to a company, even a small company. And he's got to go through those and toss them in the basket or take them to the big boss.
Yep.
Well, we kept trying, and we were going through Sonny Bono. I knew Sonny when he had a crew cut. Really? And but anyway, and then many years later, I formed a rock and roll group called the Zounds, and with a jazz musician that was quite famous called Jack Millman, and he and I formed a record company, and we called it Zounds Records. And so my rock group, the Zounds, did 4, 5, 6 sides, whatever, and it came to the attention of the arranger for Sonny and Cher, and they were putting together a tour concert, and it was through that they selected the Zounds. Didn't know that I was in it necessarily, you know, other than the credit for the writing of the songs.
Yeah.
And we got together and we rehearsed separately. The group did the music aside, you know, for a couple of weeks in advance of the concert. And Sonny and Cher, of course, they knew what they were singing. They'd already had the hit records. And again, right at the top of their career, I Got You, Babe, and The Beat Goes On, and so on. And so the first concert date was in San Diego. And San Diego Civic Auditorium had just been built. That's how far back that was. And so when I arrived, I see Sonny, you know, and I was kidding him about he had long hair. And but at any rate, we did the concert, and it was about, I don't know, close to 3 months that we traveled with Sonny and Cher.
This is pretty cool, getting to meet this guy who's played with legends. It's really, it's a neat experience.
You know, Elvis is such a big name, but I'm much more of a fan of Little Richard. So
Oh, really?
if you could
Yeah.
talk about that,
Well,
that would be fantastic.
I never worked with Richard, but I was there many times when he was recording, which to me was thrilling enough, and he was definitely a character.
Yeah.
And I'll relate one quick little story about Richard that I get a kick out of because I can see it so vividly. Art Roop was the owner of Specialty Records, and Art Roop was, you know, an older fella with thinning hair, and anyway, he'd be up in the booth, in the recording booth, and Richard and the band would be down below, and he kept goofing up or something. And so Art was telling him, he got on the microphone and speaks down into the studio, and he says, "Richard, you better straighten up because you are replaceable. Don't think you're not," you know, one of those. And Richard is looking like this, his eyes got so big, and he stomped on the ground and he says, "Art Roop, don't you be calling me Richard, you call me Miss Richard, you understand?"
It's a good thing I'm younger and not that old because he was absolutely adorable.
He seems to be really proud of what I'm doing and what we're all doing, and he says he has, you know, 6 new ladies in his life, which is really cool.
I booked a concert of top artists of the day, and Jerry Lee was on the bill, and he wouldn't come out. He wouldn't go on stage, and he had been drinking. I'm sorry, sad to say, but everybody tried to get him out. They couldn't even drag him out physically. I mean, he was stuck to the chair. You know?
Wow.
So I went backstage and went into the dressing room, and I talked to him, and I, like a Dutch uncle, as they say, and I said, "Jerry, you got to get out there. The crowd is going crazy, and they can't wait any longer." I said, "They're going to kill us all. You know, they're going to mob the place," and I think they may have. He says, "Hey man, I ain't going out on that stage. They owe me $40. They shorted me $40, and that was his big excuse. And you know, $40 was $40, but still, you know. And so finally, I heard enough of the $40 thing, and I said, "Jerry, I'll pay you myself to go out." And fortunately, and I don't usually carry a lot of cash, and I reached in and I had 2 20s, and I gave them to him, and then he snapped those up like he hadn't seen them forever, you know. And he stashed them in his pocket, and I said, "Come on." So he gets up, and he heads out on stage, and I followed him out, and I decided to stay in the wings so that he wouldn't turn around and come back. And so he gets out there, and if you ever remember seeing an appearance of Jerry Lee Lewis, the Killer, and now I can tell you why they call him the Killer, because he almost killed me. But he gets out there and he sits down at the piano stool and deliberates for a minute before he hits the keyboard, and he stands up, and before he even hits the first note, he kicks the piano bench or stool, whichever is there, out from under him, and he just kicks it back. Well, in his frame of mind, because of that $40 that he thought he was never going to see, he kicked that bench so hard, and I was 25 feet at least from there, and it came all the way back and it hit me right here in the shin. I got the scar to prove it, as I told you.
Next time on Music Man's Ladies Band.
It turns out it's going to be for an Elvis Presley movie. One was Joe Cocker. The other one, by the way, was Steve Martin. And we had to sit so close, and that's the thing I love the most. She had the cutest little place I'd ever seen.